And we are back with another episode with the ladies from Girl Talk. In this part 2 of our 3-part series, we continued our conversation on how someone can be allies to survivors of sexual harassment. Before we get to it, if you've somehow stumbled on this episode, do check out part 1 of this 3-part series, and thank you for tuning in. Go ahead and share an episode with your friends, subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms, and we are on Amazon Music too. If this is not your first episode, we truly appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. So, without further ado, remember, be bold and stay inspired. Here are the ladies from Girl Talk. Heather, just now when you mentioned something about, I think in the list of questions I also asked, what is the definition of like harassment, right? Because you were mentioning something, and then someone actually also said, like that also harassment, right? So, what is the definition of harassment? In your own words. Yeah.
For us, because we are not like a legal organization, nor are we strongly petitioning for everybody to go and report, right? So it doesn't go into like legal definitions. It doesn't go into that. Because of that, I think harassment is simply for the purposes of processing your own experiences. Harassment is whatever you feel has put you in an uncomfortable enough position that you want to label it as that. I think this is important, like in the specific context of for the person who has experienced it to deal with their own experiences. So I'm not saying that if like someone sit next to you on an MRT, then you're like, oh my gosh, this person sit next to me, then you can go and like flame them on Instagram. That's not what I'm talking about. But it is very helpful to know that you can call it whatever you want to deal with it on your own. In our process of getting to Girl Talk, we talked to so many people who had experiences that basically like word for word is like, you can tell it's verbal harassment, somebody put their hands on them as molestation, but they just refuse to call it that, which is also okay. Like as long as you are not completely like denying it, as long as whatever you are labeling it is something that helps you to make sense of the situation, I think you can call it whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
for us, because we are survivor centric, that's always going to be like our focus as a platform, right? What helps you as the survivor deal with your experiences, what helps you process, heal, and move on.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to actually add on that this actually did happen with someone that I know. So when we were doing research and stuff, we had to interview different people. So I interviewed this, it was through a friend. So my friend told me that, hey, I found a friend of mine that will be willing to share with you, and she has experienced harassment before. And I was like, okay, that's great. I would like to hear more about it. So I actually met up with this lady, and then she spoke to me about it. Mm-hmm. And then after, when she was telling me about her experiences, like in my head, it was like alarms going off. I was like, okay, this is like 100% harassment. I don't know why she's not doing anything about it. I don't know how to like help her, because like that was before everything started, right? So I was like the first person that actually really spoke to that experienced harassment. Okay. And then at the end of it, she said that, but I don't think it's harassment, which made me like very like confused, because I was like, this is so obviously like harassment. He touched you, you felt uncomfortable, you remembered it, and your friend thinks it's harassment. Why is it not harassment to you? So I tried to probe, of course, like in different ways and like gently. And from what I understood was that she said that, because it was not set in like an intentional harass. Like he's not like trying to be creepy. It's not like they sit next to each other and then he purposely like touch her thighs or whatever. It's sometimes that when they are like, they're friends, right? So sometimes friends are a bit more touchy, and then sometimes he touches like a certain area of like her body that makes her uncomfortable. Then I said, why not you raise it up with your friend? Because if he's really a friend, you say that, I actually don't really like it maybe when you touch like my shoulders, it makes me feel uncomfortable. He's not gonna be like what, because he's your friend, right? He should understand. But then she said that, oh, but I'm afraid that if I raise this up, then our dynamics would change, and that he will feel that, oh, like she's very sensitive. I cannot like play around with her like too wildly. I have to be careful with like where my hands go, etc. So to her, it was quite like strange, I guess, to have that conversation, because to me it felt very clear, but to her it's another situation. And of course we have to respect whatever harassment means to her. If she says it's not, then it's not harassment. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, before I say something, Yun Rong. I don't want to say Jun Rong. Yun Rong, do you have anything? Sorry, Yun Rong again.
It's okay. Actually, while Heather and Daniela was sharing, right, I actually recalled, like during our training as well, there was one part where they mentioned that like, if you're talking to like a victim slash survivor, right, one of the things that you can approach is like, if let's say that person is describing the situation like as a situation, or not calling it a harassment case or assault or violence, then you just follow whatever term they are using. Because like, by the way they're describing, maybe in your definition it is considered harassment, but maybe in their dictionary they don't want to call it that. But then you can try to understand and empathize. Don't try to keep pushing the terminology, because what you can do is to absorb what they're telling you, and then try to help them get the resources they need. Yeah, so sometimes like it's okay if the terms that you use are slightly different, but just know that you can be like there for that person lah, even if the terms you use are different. Just be there to listen to them, to listen to what happened to them. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying, if let's say for example, Danny, you mentioned, right? So I mean, if it's totally up to them to kind of like share their story. I mean, share whatever happened to them, right? Whether they decide to or not is entirely up to them. I mean, for example, us as allies or friends who we do not force it on them to kind of like go report it and stuff like that, right? Is that what you try and say? What you ladies are saying?
Yeah, so when I was speaking to her, I never once said that's harassment. I never like once like I think you're wrong. You don't say it, you just try to understand it from their point of view. And even at the end of it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, okay, thank you so much for your time and sharing your experiences.
Okay.
Because I also asked her like many other questions, not just about her, like this particular experience. Then it was only afterwards that I went to share with like the Girl Talk team. Then we were like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And then we had that responder training also. Then that's where that what the information that Yun Rong shared came in. Then we're like, yeah, so like what Heather said, harassment is what you define as harassment. We're not here to tell you what should or should not make you feel uncomfortable.
Okay, but I've got a question. Okay, what if they share it with you and it's something that you feel that might it's let's say that she'll be in danger, for example, like let's say if she's like a family member that keeps harassing her and stuff like that, right? So in that kind of situation, I mean, I'm just asking this because I mean, I'm sure that ever happens, right? But the thing is, we can't force it on them to kind of report it, right? So what are the next few steps that we could do to kind of like help? Heather or Yun Rong? Anyone?
Maybe Heather, you go first.
Okay.
Throwing difficult questions my way. Okay.
Okay.
In general, right, the body's immediate response to such negative triggers would be to try and survive. So what survival looks like is very different for different people. For some people, it's like leaving right immediately. For some people, it's not doing anything. For some people, it may even be pandering to the situation or to the perp because they believe, okay, this is the way that I won't be hit. This is the way that I won't be hurt, right? I think as a third party looking in, I hesitate to say what is the right thing to do.
Okay.
But like as a human being who lives on this earth, just like as a human being, I think if anybody's in a situation where they are facing like bodily threat or bodily harm, even if they think that is the best thing for them to stay in that situation, it's not. There are options, right? But it's not helpful to tell someone like, hey, you shouldn't stay there. You should just like go and report, full stop. Firstly, reporting can be a very tiring and difficult process. And I think a great thing that we can realize, right, is that there are so many resources. There are so many resources and avenues where you can seek help. There are, of course, emergency hotlines, and then there's like your police, if like that's where you want to go straight away. If not, there are other softer approaches. There are organizations such as like Aware. There are many ways to provide a listening ear and to gently urge somebody to seek the necessary, sometimes urgent, sometimes immediate help that they need. I cannot say for certain what is the right thing to do in every situation, but I think to approach with empathy and to be aware that as a third party, sometimes you have perspective into things that matter. And that's why it's important to educate yourself about it. Go for the Aware First Responder training. Learn what the options and the alternatives are. For the person who's in the situation who cannot consider their alternatives, go so you can consider their alternatives for them. Yeah, not to make decisions on anybody's behalf, but to be there for people, when they need it.
I think it's like it's not about like telling them exactly what to do or like forcing them like, oh, this is happening here, I'm going to call the police now. Like it's different. It's more of like raising all these options up to them. So like, let's say something is really happening, they are saying like, oh, I'm crying, I'm feeling really like hurt right now. He just like beat me. So once you hear this kind of thing, but then if let's say like he or she says like, I don't want to report it, then what you can do is send them a list of like numbers they can call or like places they can go to. So instead of telling them like, you should go to this, you just tell them like, here's a list of places. It's completely up to you. Like anytime you feel like it's getting too much, just call this number. It's all here and I'm here for you as well. If you don't want to do it, I can do the report. I can make the report for you and I can call on your behalf so you don't have to deal with it. Yeah, so it's just presenting all these options. And of course, like if let's say they still don't want, you just got, as a third party, you just got to like monitor, like make sure that you still hear from them. That's something that you can actively do, even if you feel like you don't want to like force them to do something.
Yeah, and I also definitely think that it depends on like your position as the third party. So if example it's a family member and it's another family member that is like sexually violating your family member, so if it happens within the family, you're in a unique position to actually do something about it. But of course, if this is like an acquaintance that brought it up to you, then you also need to consider like, do you have that bandwidth? Are you able to carry them through this journey if you're going to suggest something? So you can provide them the options, but if like what Aaron says that, okay, do you need my help with reporting, etc., you need to consider your own position as well and also learn how to like take care of yourself, because it is a really, really lengthy process. And if you cannot be there for that person like from start to end, it's actually better if you refer them to Aware, because Aware actually has like volunteers that accompany, like I think they call it befrienders. So they accompany like anyone who comes to them asking for help. They have defenders who go with them to report to the court cases, etc. Yeah, so they always show up.
Okay, so the last year or so has seen increased interest and awareness surrounding the topic of campus sexual assault. When previously this topic was one that was constantly hidden or just not known to the wider public. So what do you think was the turning point and what are your opinions on it?
Okay, so like the turning point was definitely Monica Bay.
Okay.
Yeah, so because of that, right, personally, like all of us saw so many like social media posts, like just resharing her story, people adding their own commentaries on it. It's just something that you keep saying every single day. And as someone who has experienced like a form of like sexual harassment, be it on campus or just in your daily life, it just really hits home lah, basically. So like I know I kept talking to this about my with my friends, and you know, it was just like a daily thing. And then over time, I think the subsequent weeks there were like even more news reports that came out, like, oh, peeping Tom in NTU, or like in NUS, or like wherever, right, in Singapore universities. So then I think that was definitely the turning point. And my view on it was that it's about time. Like, you know, we've heard about this so many times, and finally people are talking about it. Finally, like, our parents are talking about it, our friends are talking about it, our siblings, our little like young nephews and nieces also have heard about this. So you know, it's about time now, basically. And I feel like we really did take advantage of this time where everybody knew about this to like quickly, you know, come up with an initiative. Because what we found was that so many people are aware that, you know, these scary things happen in universities to our young children, but what can they do about it? You know, so I feel like that was the gap that we wanted to fill. You know, it's not about like scaring everybody, like, oh, this happens, like, you know, to every like university student. No, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is to like fill the gap of like saying, like, you know, these are the steps you can take, and if let's say you want some action to be taken, you can report this to the school. This is the email, this is the number, you know, how to collect evidence, how to, you know, say that you're uncomfortable without actually saying the word no, you know. So yeah, so these were the steps that we wanted to take. So I think at that time the turning point was very good, because it gave us like a platform to like really identify that gap and then quickly go in and feel that, yeah.
The campaign that you have come up with takes on a more educational approach, where it seeks to raise awareness and teach people or girls in the community to be aware of sexual assault and how to deal with them. Do you think that there's a potential for structural and or systemic change to address the issue of campus sexual assault? Someone want to take that? Heather or Danny? Or
100% not my question to take.
Okay, I think.
Wait. I got a very
Yeah.
curious question. Why though, Heather?
Yeah, why?
Don't why. We had this conversation so much. Okay, when we were first establishing our campaign, right, we had to think about who was the target audience, right? And we were thinking about maybe targeting like organizations, like maybe schools, like bigger organizations in support of this, because they can do more. And while that is true, it takes so much effort to work up towards systemic change. And it's not that I think that that is impossible, but it's just that where I feel I have the greatest impact as I am now is on an individual level, having these conversations with people, you know, like sharing my own experiences or empowering them through such means. So it's not that I think that it's impossible. It's just that I am not, I wouldn't say that I'm trained on it or thinking very hard about it. And because of that, I think it's better to ask somebody else.
Okay, so like yes, Girl Talk took a very like educational approach, where we even created like a VR training tool to like teach female undergraduates to respond, basically giving them scenarios to practice by putting on a headset and then like putting them into these scenarios where they can practice responding. So that is one of the ways that we tried to have an educational tool for them to try. So what we attempted to do was, actually no, what we did was that we had this event, right, to educate like around 90 to 100 female undergraduates on like how to respond, by giving them like a panel event where like, you know, experts such as like lawyers, psychiatrists, and also like activists came down to like, you know, give a lot of tips and advice. So that was one of the ways we tried to like inject like the education to them, because at the time we knew that in universities, right, they had this like e-module. So it's a 15-minute online module where you have to take, like every student had to take to educate themselves about like sexual harassment. But of course 15 minutes, a lot of our respondents felt like it was not enough. It felt like they didn't learn about like what consent is, you know, how to draw boundaries, what exactly they need to do to collect evidence and report a certain case to get something done. So so from all this we can tell that like we don't really have a module, in schools, in sex education. We also don't really learn about what consent is. We only learn like about abstinence. So then there was like a big gap to fill. And then suddenly you go into university, this happens to you, and then you're just like, what? It basically you just hit a wall and become really confused, and then you try to like cope with it by not thinking about it. So going back to the question of like whether we think that systemic change can happen. So we feel like, okay, maybe I feel like in the future, maybe not in like 1 or 2 years lah, but like in the future, I believe that it will eventually come. Like let's say the educational system, they will insert more topics about consent, about what sexual harassment is from a young age, so that as we grow up, we learn to accept that it is wrong and it's not something that should be swept under the rug. So that's also one of the reasons why like the VR tool was created, because actually personally for myself, I wanted that to happen, because I saw like I sort of like had this like vision that like maybe in the future, schools can actually use these tools, combine technology and like hard social issues together to educate more people more effectively. Yeah, so I know it sounds a bit like it's gonna happen in the future, but I feel like it will eventually happen. It's just slowly but surely. Yeah.
Okay, so it should really start from young, because sex education, we never really talk about it when we were in the schools, in younger schools.
Yeah, I didn't even know what consent was.
Yeah, that's the thing, we don't even talk about it, because it's not in our culture to talk about these kind of things.
Yeah, but the good thing is now even like mainstream media like Netflix, they've been releasing a lot of shows about like sex education, about like Vox, they have this series about like what sex is about, what is sexual harassment. So I think this is really good. It's like the first step towards changing this whole like conversation about sexual harassment.